Hello, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon session all about admissions types and admissions decisions. My name is Holly Haig, and I am one of our Education USA advisors here at the US-UK Fulbright Commission. I'm delighted to be speaking with all of you tonight. Just a couple of pieces of information before we get started. This session will be recorded and you will be sent a copy as well after this. So if you do need to dip out partway through, please don't worry and don't feel like you have to kind of frantically write down everything I say, because you'll be able to refer back to this in your own time as well. And another thing is just that this session is aimed predominantly at those of you who have already completed an application for an undergraduate program in the US and are now waiting on those admissions decisions to come through. However, if you haven't yet completed your application, but you're hoping to apply to a US university, this session is very much still relevant. And so do carry on, watching. But if you're in that position where you've not yet applied, you may also really benefit from a session that we're hosting next week, all about studying in the USA. And so I'm going to put a link to that event for any of you who haven't yet applied, but may want to join us then. All right, so let's get started. First and foremost, I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction to Education USA and what it is that we do. And so we are based at the US-UK Fulbright Commission, and the Fulbright Commission was founded in the aftermath of World War II by a US senator called Senator Fulbright, who believed that the best way to avoid a Second World War from happening was to promote free an understanding and intercultural exchange through education between the US and the UK. And so that's exactly what we aim to do in our work at the US-UK Fulbright Commission. And the section of that work that I represent and that my colleague Sarah represents, who'll be joining us later on, is through our Education USA advisory service. So what we do at Education USA is we are part of a global network of advisors who help students in their countries by offering free, unbiased advice and information about studying in the US. And so if it's your dream to go over to the US and pursue a degree, that is exactly what we're here to help with. All right then, so in this webinar, we're going to be talking about admissions types. And unlike here in the UK, there are several different admissions types that you can submit applications to in the US. And each one comes with slightly different rules and regulations. So it's important to really be aware of these as you're applying. And I'm going to quickly go in and describe each one of them to you now. The first type that I'm going to talk about is what is known as early decision. Now, if you apply to a university or to a college through an early decision plan, make sure that this is your kind of number one choice of institution worldwide, so anywhere in the world. This is because early decision is what we call restrictive and binding. So what restrictive means is that you can only apply to one university. And what the binding part of that means is that if you're admitted, you make a pledge that you are going to enroll in that institution if you're accepted. And so as part of this, your family and your school will sign a document stating that you intend to honour that commitment and that early decision policy if you're accepted. If, however, you break this code and you are accepted but refuse to enroll, it then may kind of reflect negatively on your school and any future applicants in years to come. So that's something, it is quite a serious commitment that you make through the early decision plan. And so we really encourage you to think carefully as you're looking into early decision. The real benefit of early decision, though, is that since you will apply earlier, normally with a deadline in kind of November time, early November, you will indeed kind of hear back from universities about their decision, whether you've been accepted by December. So this gives you some more time to know, do you need to submit additional applications to other universities or not? And it also gives you that opportunity to express your interest in applying to that university. So that's early decision. There is also a type of admission called early decision 2, which has all of those same principles that we just talked about. However, rather than applying in kind of early November, around the 1st of November, instead, early decision 2 that some universities offer will tend to have a deadline in January alongside regular decision types, which we'll talk about later on. Next up, we're going to talk about early action. So early action, again, normally has an earlier application deadline, so around the 1st of November again, but early action is non-binding, so you're not obligated to enroll, even if you're accepted at an early action university. And so that's kind of that key difference between early action and early decision. Some universities you may come across operate with what's called restrictive early action. And if you have questions about that, again, we're happy to talk about them with you in the Q&A section of this session. All right. The most common deadline that you may be familiar with, that almost all universities will have, is what is known as regular decision. So students will typically apply around the 1st of January, again, with deadlines and dates and application dates. Really important to double check on the university website as to when these are, because they can vary a little bit from university to university. So you'll normally apply, as I say, in January time, which means that you'll normally hear back from the universities by the end of March with their admissions decisions. Regular decision applications are what we call non-binding. So again, if admission is offered to you, it's up to you whether you accept that or decline it. And it's also non-restrictive, i.e. you can apply to as many universities as you like. There's no limit in the US system like we have here in the UK. That said, we do recommend that, due to kind of a money and time frame perspective, that you normally apply to a maximum of sort of 6 to 8 universities is kind of a manageable amount. And then the last type of admission that we're going to talk about is what we call rolling admissions. Now, some institutions in the US will keep their applications open until they've filled all of the spaces that they have available. So if you're thinking of applying to a university that operates with rolling admission, it really emphasizes that idea of applying as early as you can. But rolling admissions at the same time is also a really helpful option and opportunity for perhaps students who are coming to the process and exploring it a little bit later, and who haven't had the time to prepare an application for some of those other deadlines that we've already spoken about. Sometimes applications can be, open up until June, for instance. The thing with rolling admissions, though, is that, as I was saying, the later that you apply, the more likely that funding will have already been allocated to other students in your year group. And so it may well be that less funding is available the later you apply in rolling admissions deadlines. And you'll also, if you are applying later on, might find that you've got less time to kind of get together any of that pre-departure information, like arranging your visa and arranging flights to and from the US. So another thing to think about with rolling admissions. Okay, so that's broadly the types of different admissions types that you're going to see in the US. We're now going to talk to you about what the different admissions decisions that you'll receive from US universities are and what they mean, and kind of how you are able to respond to those. So the first type of decision or admissions decision that you might receive from a US university, and the one we all hope to receive, is an acceptance. First of all, congratulations. The institution will likely send you information on how you can accept their offer. If you've applied for financial aid at the university, your offer will likely include a kind of outline of your financial aid package that they're also offering. Although this might come slightly later, depending on the institution, and if their financial aid and admissions offices work slightly separately. So once you've received an acceptance, you will then decide how you want to respond to their offer. So there's a couple of ways that you can respond. Firstly, we have got that you accept the offer. If you've applied early decision, you have to accept it, so bear that in mind. If you didn't apply early decision and you want to think about your options, remember to think about the factors that are most important to you and to really pick a university that meets the most of these. It may be, for instance, that you go to a university that is asking for the lowest contribution financially from you and your family as part of your studies. The next option for you to do to your acceptance is to decline it. So you might decide that you're not going to accept an offer from a particular university. And it's important that you let the admissions office know this politely and as soon as possible. The third and least common option is to defer your offer. Now, again, here in the UK, there is a little bit more familiarity with things like taking a gap year, taking a year out, but it's not as common in the US. So if you're hoping to defer your offer for maybe a semester or a year, it's really important that you speak to the admissions officer or the international admissions counsellor as soon as possible for guidance on whether or not you're able to do this. And also with a deferral, it's important that you may have to apply for funding all over again for the next application year, even though you've secured your place. So definitely worth having that conversation sooner rather than later with the admissions staff. Okay. The next option that you might hear from a US university once you've applied is that you have been deferred. Now, this will be a decision that you may receive if you've applied early decision. And what it means is that the university has considered your application and thinks it's a good application. However, they want to get a little bit more context about their application pool as a whole. And so they want to look at your application again once they've received their regular round admissions applications, as we were speaking about before. And so you can typically expect then to receive your official acceptance or decline by the end of March. So once you've been deferred from early decision, you'll hear a final either yes or no into the spring. So it will be a little bit later. If you've been deferred from your early decision school, note that this also opens you up then to apply to other schools, either through early decision 2 plans or to regular decision plans as well. Another decision that you may hear, unfortunately, from a US university is that your application has been unsuccessful, that you've been declined. We know that this is usually not what you're hoping for, but try your best not to take this too personally. Remember that admissions committees face a really difficult task of choosing a very small amount of students from often really large application pools. And so this is usually not a reflection on you. It doesn't mean that you're not a great student and that you won't be a great fit for several US universities. It just might mean that, on this occasion at this particular institution, it won't work out. And so then the next and final admissions decision that you may hear back from a US institution is that you have been waitlisted. Now, this is less common than some of the ones that we've just discussed, but it is possible. So being put on a waitlist means that you have really strong credentials and, the admissions committee really wanted to have you on campus, but there were some slightly more competitive applicants in that particular admissions round that you've applied for. There's still a chance that you might be offered admission, but this relies on students who've received an acceptance and enough of them to decline their offer to free up space in the incoming class. So if you would like to remain on the waitlist, you'll often need to accept your place on the waitlist with the university, and in their offer to be on the waitlist, they will usually provide detailed instructions of what you need to do to make that happen. If you are waitlisted at an institution that you definitely attend, it's really important that you let them know if that if I'm offered a place, I will enroll at the university. And I'd also say, if there is any significant update to your application that you'd want them to be aware of, get in touch with them in a short, succinct way. For instance, have you gone above and beyond your predicted grade, or have you done something new and exciting that could add to your application? You might want to get in touch with them in a sort of positive, professional and succinct way to let them know of any updates. Next up, I just want to go over a couple of important notes that you might want to consider as you're putting together as you're kind of assessing your offers and kind of proceeding with your next steps in this process of US admission. First of all is to think about the pros and cons of each type of application when it comes to funding. So as you're probably aware, if you've already submitted an early application, applying early means that you get an earlier decision, but it also means kind of putting together that application a little bit sooner. But it may mean that, if you're looking for significant amounts of funding, applying early can give you that stronger chance of securing the funding because you're expressing that kind of interest in pursuing that particular path at that university. However, this will look slightly differently at each institution. If funding isn't so much of a consideration for you, then you may choose to look at early action plans and also regular round plans, because that will allow you the opportunity to compare different offers when you have them all together. Another thing that we get asked about a lot here at Education USA is, is the offer that I receive conditional or unconditional? What if I accept my offer, but then I don't meet my predicted grades come the summer? So usually, although it does depend on the university, and I'd always encourage you to check your offer letter to see if there's any information about this in there. But usually US universities will expect you to perform broadly in line with any predictions that you've been given. So if you don't meet them exactly, but are still pretty close to them, likely nothing to worry about. However, if your final grades are drastically lower than what you predicted, a university often reserves the right to, ask more information about what happened, if there were any extenuating circumstances. And in extreme cases, they may actually take back that offer of admission. So it's really important that, just because you've been accepted to a US university, that you don't kind of take your foot off the gas and really make sure that you're performing at that high standard throughout the rest of your secondary education. And then last but not least, we've also put up here about having the UK as a backup plan. So please be aware that you can complete UCAS applications alongside your US applications. And as well, many UK universities will have options to study abroad in the US as part of that degree. We always recommend to students at any stage of the process that it's a good idea to have a backup plan here in the UK, just in case things don't work out with admissions decisions in the US in the way that you would like. Okay, so before we move into the Q&A section, and I invite my colleague Sarah up on screen to help me out, I wanted to take a moment to go through some of the ways that we here at Education USA can support you as you're receiving admissions decisions, as you're putting together applications for these different admissions types as well. First and foremost is our website, which has a plethora of really great resources. Particularly under the Going to the USA tab, you'll find a lot of information about applying to US universities, putting together funding applications, and also kind of choosing a university, which may be relevant for some of you who perhaps haven't yet applied. If you haven't yet applied as well, you can also register for that event I was talking about earlier on under our events tab. Next up, we also take questions via phone and email, and we'll talk about how you can book in a Zoom call with us on the next slide, but please do get in touch with us via email with any questions that you've got. As I mentioned, you can book in a one-to-one video appointment with us. Again, all details are on our website, but if you want to talk through any specific circumstances that you have via phone or email, please do. And then you're all already doing a great job of being aware of this, but we also have events all about studying in the US throughout the year. Well, at the minute, they're all online, but we do hope to resume in person when circumstances allow as well. All right then, so we're now going to move into the Q&A portion of our session. And so if you've got any questions about different admissions types or an admissions decision and what it might mean for you, please do use the Q&A box to write that in, and my colleague Sarah and I are going to help you answer those as best as we can.
Hello, everyone. As you're putting those questions in the box, I'll just introduce myself. Holly may have given a brief introduction to me already, but I am Sarah, and I am originally from Chicago in the US and completed both my undergraduate degree and postgraduate degree there. But I've been working at Fulbright now for the past 5 years and living in London for the past 7 years. So very happy, Holly and I are very happy to answer any questions that you might have about any of the content that has been covered tonight.
Perfect. So I'll just get started, Sarah. We've got a question here that I briefly touched on, but I wonder if you might want to re-emphasize that. So do US universities require specific A-level grades or equivalent, or is an acceptance to a US university unconditional?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And it is going to depend on the university. So depending on where you apply, that they don't necessarily have certain, I'm not sure what they're called here in the UK, Holly.
Entry requirements.
Entry requirements, that's right. They don't necessarily have certain entry requirements the same way that they would here in the UK, just because the application is more holistic. But some universities are going to be highly competitive and are going to expect really top grades. Other universities are going to be a bit more open to grades at different levels. And so it does just kind of depend on where you're applying. And then as Holly mentioned, in terms of whether that acceptance is unconditional, typically a university is going to expect that you're performing at about the same level as when you applied. And so when you get those results in from your exams, they're going to kind of compare them to those predicted grades. And if you're at about the same as what your predictions were, or maybe quite close, but not quite there, it's not going to be an issue. But if you are, it is drastically below what your predictions were, then a university might kind of wonder what's happened there. They might kind of question it. And in a very extreme case, they may at that point rescind that offer. So it's not that it's unconditional necessarily, but it's also not conditional in the same way that you would here in the UK. So I know it's a bit confusing, and we do get asked that question a lot. And we have another question here, Holly, about how students in the UK usually prepare for their SATs and any resources to help with this. So I think we might be able to signpost you in the right direction for that.
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, on our website, we have a really helpful guide all about preparing for standardized admissions tests like the ACT and the SAT. And so we have a lot of resources and links on our website to free information and guides that you can use, such as the Khan Academy. There's a lot of really helpful tools on things like YouTube as well, all about preparing for these tests, if they are required, I should add. And then for standardized tests as well, you also can go on say Amazon and order a book or a guide to help you with practice tests. But there are free practice tests online that I think are probably the best way to get familiar with the type of tests that the ACT and the SAT are, that will allow you to kind of get to grips with how to do the test, the different timings, the test technique. Sarah, I wonder if you might be able to put a link in the chat to to our website that's got some more information on SATs and ACTs as well. So I think for now, that is the end of the questions that I'm seeing. I'll give everyone a couple of seconds to put any last minute questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. And thank you, Sarah, for putting those testing resources there for us.
If you have a specific situation, I know some of you here may have already applied, but if you're somebody who's joining and looking to apply in the future, and you're trying to figure out which of these different types of application timelines are best for you, definitely encourage you to make use of our resources. You can sign up. It's a great opportunity to sign up for an advising call and speak through your specific circumstances and try to figure out, based on your needs and what you're looking to do, what, whether early decision might be a good option for you, or early action or regular decision, and trying to figure that out based on your own individual needs if you need any help.
Great, I can see a couple more questions coming in. So first of all, Sarah, we've got a question about what sort of A-level grades are usually required, or asked for at kind of ultra competitive institutions in the US.
Yeah. So if you're looking at the very highly competitive institutions in the US, which may include some of the ones that you've heard of before, but may also include some that you've never heard of before. There's some very top-rated liberal arts colleges in the US, a lot of research institutions that might be ones that you've never heard of before that are very highly rated, and they are going to be looking for the top grade. So if you're looking to those ultra competitive ones, they're typically going to be looking, if you're looking for kind of those A's and A stars really, across the board, and they will have lots of applicants who have all of those things, and so you'll want to make sure you're putting together a strong application. And if you are looking for more information on putting together that strong application, I know Holly highlighted our upcoming webinar next week, our Study in the US webinar. And so if you haven't applied yet and you are interested in learning more about studying in the US, you should definitely apply to our study, not apply, but sign up for to attend our Study in the US webinar next week, because we can go through kind of the whole process of what that application looks like and how to put together a strong application. And it also goes through the application timeline, which I see a question has come up in the chat here. And so, I mean, if you haven't applied yet and you're looking to kind of apply for maybe autumn of 2023, now is a good time to be getting started and coming along to that Study in the US webinar next week, where we can go into that in more detail.
Definitely. And then we've got another question here, which I'm happy to answer, about whether, could you apply to, say, 3 universities if you were to apply with an early action plan? So broadly, the answer is yes. You are able to apply to other universities if you're applying to one with early action. However, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, there are a couple of exceptions and a handful of universities that are ultra selective, that operate with what we call this restrictive early action plan, which means that you can only apply to their university early action. So that's just something to bear in mind, and to really make sure that you are researching when you are looking to apply to each college. All right, I think this concludes all of the questions that we've got about applying and application deadlines and timelines. If you do have any questions that are related to other topics, or you want to chat through a specific circumstance of yours, please do get in touch. As Sarah said, you can get in touch with us by booking a Zoom call. You can also get in touch with us via email, which I will pop in the chat before we wrap up. And that is just advising@fulbright.edu. fulbright.org.uk. Thank you all so much for tuning in this evening, and hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.